music scene in Cameroon these days. The place to be is here, right? That's what he said in that song. And one of the main reasons Cameroon is hemmed in its current quagmire, many say it's hugely hinged on corruption. They say corruption is responsible for the absence of a deep sea port in Limbe, a cement factory in the same city. Corruption is also responsible for the sidelining of English-speaking Cameroonians from top jobs at organizations like the National Oil Refinery, Sonara, and you can stretch that list and you will have content to fit in there. Now, corruption, the cankerworm, has been a huge preoccupation of the Catholic Church, and we're talking back to the 1970s. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you very much, Divine. It's always a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure because I read a lot of comments from the social media platforms about this. People say, yeah, it's good to talk about what the Catholic Church has been doing for Cameroon in general, and for issues like this in particular.
That's correct.
Right.
Up until the present crisis in the northwest and the southwest regions of our country, corruption was the issue that was of great concern to the Catholic Church.
Okay.
Yes, and I believe to other organizations and other churches. But the Catholic Church, when you look at the history of the Catholic Church in Cameroon, you see that there has not been any other issue that has been of such at the center of the church's concern as corruption has been. And this, you could date this back. You mentioned the 1970s, and that is correct. In Bamenda, the then Bishop of Bamenda, today Paul Vedekov, who is of late now, created a group called the Christian Studies and Ecumenical Group, which brought together Catholics and there were Protestants and people of other faiths who were of university degree level. I think they wanted to discuss issues in the country that could be this group could handle. And then that was in 1973. Christian Cardinal Toumé, the retired bishop of Archbishop of Douala now, was the rector of the major seminary, St. Thomas Aquinas in Bambui, and the bishop of Bamenda, Paul Vedekov, gave him the go-ahead to animate this group, Christian study group, which was very popular. You know, such a thing in a city like Bamenda, you know, the enthusiasm was there.
In the 70s.
In the 70s, and you know, people were very active and people were ready to participate in that group. And so it became very, very popular. The press was there to bring up the resolutions of this group, their meetings, cover the meetings, and so it is said that, and this is Christian Cardinal Toumé has written this, has talked about this in his book. It's called The Political Regimes of Amadou Ahidjo and Paul Biya and Christian Toumé, priest. So this is very well documented. He said that it was at that time that Mr. Aboem Achoy, David Aboem Achoy, was the governor of the Northwest at the time. And so President Ahidjo asked him to investigate that group.
Yeah, because it was disturbing.
Yes, you know, and in the place like Bamenda, you know, everybody was talking about it. People were waiting for the next session. When were they meeting again? And you know, so they discussed, among other things, corruption in Cameroon. And so the governor Aboem Achoy met the cardinal, who was then priest, Father Christian Toumé. You know, and the bishop to find out what was happening. And so they gave him a thorough detail of what they were doing. And so he said, you know, this is not subversive. You know, in Cameroon in those days, and I believe it's still the same thing today, if you were against what was being the established theories, you are deemed a subversive.
So you open the cupboard to expose the skeleton.
Yeah, where you are subversive. So they thought that the Catholic Church was in Bamenda was doing something subversive, But after Aboy Machoi's investigation, he realized that there was nothing. He even praised them for it.
Okay.
Yes. So it is thought that one of the key members of the group was a Protestant pastor, Solomon Fogwe.
Okay.
Yes, who was then a teacher in Kas Bambeli and in Ecole Normale. I was a very active member of this group. So what Ahidjo did was, one day he called the man to Yaoundé, you know, and you know, there are all kinds of stories about how he felt when he was called to Yaoundé, because he thought that was the end of of him.
Okay.
Yeah, Ahidjo called you to his house, man, everybody trembled. So he went to Yaoundé and was offered a job as the minister of agriculture.
Agriculture.
Yes.
Right.
You know, that was an excellent divide and rule policy.
Yes.
Because
to pull him out of the.
Yeah, he pulled
Christian
him out of this
study
group, a Christian study group, and of course, being a member of the government, you could no longer belong to this type of group, you know, which was thought to be subversive. So when he came back to Bamenda, of course, he never attended any of those meetings again, and of course, the group somehow fizzled out. But before, in 1977, based on the on this study group, what they had discovered and what they had discussed, the bishops of the then ecclesiastical province of Bamenda, and I think by then it was Boya and Bamenda. I don't know if Kumbu was existing then,
already, right.
because Kumbu was created from territory taken from the what they call the suffragan of the diocese of Bamenda.
Okay.
Yes, and I think it was was existing then, and so the bishops wrote a letter, a pastoral letter, drawing the attention of people mainly in the ecclesiastical province of Bamenda, but also throughout the country, on corruption, or what corruption was doing to our country. Corruption in competitive examinations, they condemned that. Corruption in the police force, corruption in the fact that people had to travel from Bamenda to Yaoundé to follow their documents before they were integrated, or you know, and not only Bamenda, but you know, all over the country. Okay. They denounced that very strongly. You see. And of course, the government was not very happy with that. Okay. But then that was the voice of the church that was being heard, and people became interested. Okay. So, you know, and then in 1980, I think Christian Kanatume was then the Archbishop of Garoua. He had been made a bishop, and he was in Garoua. The ecclesiastical province of Garoua also issued a letter on corruption. Okay. Which was still, you could still see the hand of the influence of this study group that began in Bamenda in the early 70s. And then, you know, of course, the press carried this letter extensively, and the actions of the Catholic Church denouncing corruption in our country. Then in 1990, the National Episcopal Conference of Cameroon issued their first letter on corruption.
This is big now.
Yeah, this is now the whole of the Episcopal Conference of the country. It's no longer limited to an ecclesiastical province as Bamenda or Garoua. You see, it's now the bishops of Cameroon who are saying, hey, what Bamenda said and what Garoua said, you know, is something of concern to everyone in Cameroon. And so they had their first letter on corruption in 1990. Denouncing, of course, the same ills that were plaguing the society. You know, corruption in every sphere of life, in competitive exams. You go to the hospital, you know, you're expected to bribe people before they give you your medication, or even before they attend to you. You go to any government service, you have to, somebody expects you to give a bribe before they attend to you, and things like that. And so the bishops were very categorical in their denunciation of that. 1997, 7 years later, the National Episcopal Conference of Cameroon came up with a letter, not specifically targeting corruption as such, but it was on justice and peace. Okay. You know, the absence of justice and peace in the country, with corruption obviously on
of
the
course,
lead.
they preach the need for justice because people are not being treated fairly.
Exactly so.
If you
People
have to pay bribe for medicines,
for medicines,
to see a doctor,
yeah,
to get your pension,
to get your pension,
it's disturbing.
Yes, and to be even attended to in the government service, and to have to travel to Yaoundé. You know, you go to Yaoundé following your files or your documents. You have to bribe people in the ministry and so on. So. You know, that was in 1998, the bishops held a conference on good governance in the country, which also created waves in this country, good governance, or the lack thereof, you know, because they denounced the lack of good governance. And corruption was still on the lead, you know, and so everywhere they denounced, you know, the absence of justice. You go to the courts, you know, where you expect to have justice rendered.
It's actually denied.
It's denied.
Right.
You know, people are kept in what do you call it, preventive detention for years
upon years without trial.
And sometimes, you know, it was the case of some reverend sisters who attend to the prison ministry. Here in Douala, the Sisters of St. Therese, really active in that domain. They take care of the of prisoners. Yes, and also the street kids and so on. And the sisters will tell you that there are people in prison who have been there and they do not know why they are there, and even the prison authorities themselves do not know why those people are doing there.
That's
you
tough.
see, there's just no record of them. You see, but they are there. They're there for years. You see, so those are the things the bishops were denouncing in their letter on good governance. And then in 2000, the year 2000, they wrote a very well-known letter on economic crisis in Cameroon, which also had corruption in the lead. So these, as I said, up until now, when the bishops, especially the bishops of the ecclesiastical province of Bamenda, are issuing, you know, pastoral letters on the Anglophone crisis now, corruption was really what took the attention of...
it has hopped from the embryonic stages and so on. I just want to do a backpedal to 1990, because you spoke lengthily about 1990. That's, I think, that year Cameroon emerged top of the charts on corruption across the world.
Oh my goodness, Divine, on two successive occasions, 2 years in a row. Cameroon was crowned as the most corrupt country in the world in 2 successive years.
What a shame.
Well, a great shame.
But when I read meaning into this, I just say to myself that it's a government that refuses to accept criticism and thinks that it is overbearing and can move on like that.
That's correct. You know, we can read that into it. And the fact that the whole world stands up and said this country is corrupt 2 years in a row, and almost... Anyway, we can't say that nothing was done, because it's after that the government started creating
the
commissions against corruption in different ministries and in different government outfits. How successful those commissions are, or how effective they are, is open to anyone's guess. You know, but then, you know, the church was very categorical about that.
All right. Now, I think I, for one, kind of understand why, despite all of such campaigns and movements and preemptive measures being proposed, corruption has continued digging deep inroads into Cameroon society. All aspects of Cameroon society, there's corruption at one point along the line. We'll not let you go like that. We have a surprise for you.
Okay.
And that's because the English Access Micro Scholarship Program was recently launched at the American Language Center in Douala. It is an initiative that's actually masterminded by the United States Department of State. It is implemented on the ground by the various U.S. embassies and language centers across the world. Some 95,000 students have successfully been trained from that program in over 85 countries, including, of course, Cameroon. Now, let's just give you highlights of what happened in Douala at the American Language Center where the program was launched.
Some days you may not see the progress that you make, but your teachers see it, your family sees it, and I hope one day I can return and see it myself. Thank you.
From the statistics, it says about 95,000 children have been trained all over since the creation of the program, at least if that's not mistaken. So he gives his word of encouragement, and he encourages the participants to hold fast, because as the representative just said, there's nothing you can do without English. English is the only access you can have to get what you want in life.
I heard there was a question, how do you feel? One person said, happy. The other one said, awesome, and so on. Why do you feel happy?
It's a pleasure for me because since I have been here, my English has improved. I'm very good at English now at school. I'm happy and say thank you to the U.S. Embassy.
All right.
It's not just a program. It's a family, a very big family that's made friends, happy.
So the English Access Micro Scholarship Program is a program conducted by the U.S. Department of State. Over 85,000 students over 95,000 students in 85 different countries have participated, and I'm just so happy to see the progress that this group of students has made, and I'm doubly happy that I was able to make it for their launching ceremony. I hope that this is the first of many times where I'm able to see their progress and they're able to impress me.
The English Access Micro Scholarship Program that we have this year is launching its activities officially. We started working in March, but it wasn't officially launched yet. So the U.S. Embassy, actually it's a scholarship for every child that is attending the program. The U.S. Embassy always comes to offer that scholarship to each student who has been selected for the Access program. So today they have come officially, represented by the Deputy Public Affairs Officer, Mr. Will Romain, to give them their awards, their scholarship awards for this program, which will take 2 years.
I guess you're probably sitting home and wondering, how do I get my kid onto that scholarship program? Well, he's still here with us, Martin Jumbam, because he's actually one of the administrators at the American Language Center in Douala. But then you probably may have to wait 2 more years, right? Is there another one that's going to be launched soon, next year, for example?
we really don't know. This is the initiative of the as you mentioned earlier, the Department of State, United States.
The USDOS.
Yes, and through the American Embassy in Yaoundé, we have been fortunate to be selected for, this is about the 4th session we are organizing here in Douala. So I really can't tell you what they have in store for us after this group is out.
But how do you go about selecting the participants?
Yes, that's a good question. We have we rely very much on the schools, the lycées, because the idea is to get children who are from poor homes, who work hard in school, who to join the program. So we cannot do this without the help of the different schools. We mainly go to the lycées, the government high schools for and we appreciate very much the cooperation of many of the principals and directors of these schools.
Okay.
You see, when we went around for the first time, it was not easy because these we couldn't blame them because they were not quite sure what we wanted.
All right.
You know, they say no. You know, there are many people with all kinds of ideas these days and religious ideas. You send your children to them, and the children come back, and you don't recognize them anymore. But once they realized that it was something really serious, organized by the American Embassy, and that their children would gain a lot from what we were teaching them, they were all very happy. And now news has gone round that this program exists here in Douala.
Okay.
And so when we go around and we go to the different schools, they are very open to us.
I'll probably be taking my kid out of the private school to a government school so she can be eligible whenever the program comes around again.
I wonder whether your daughter will be considered from an economically unfavorable home or economically disadvantaged home, but you know. You as a journalist in Canal, you may not quite qualify. But anyway, you know,
that's interesting to hear, though. Take our greetings to the kids, and well, we'll be keeping the tabs on them to see how much